The toolbox hit the dock like a dropped anchor, and 50 engineers turned around at once. "Don't waste my time," Vanessa Langford said loud enough for the cameras. "If you're so confident, fix it." Ethan Carter looked at the $40 million yacht that had beaten every expert in the country. Then he looked at his watch. School pickup was at 3:15. "Ma'am," he said, "I only need an hour." The marina laughed. They were still laughing when he asked for one thing nobody expected. Not a diagnostic scanner, not a laptop, not a single engineer's help. He asked for the maintenance log Vanessa Langford had signed herself. And that's when this story stops being about a boat. Just here. Before we go further, comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you like stories where the man everybody wrote off gets the last word, subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. The gates at Bell Harbor Marina were the kind that made a man check his own reflection before he walked through them, and Ethan Carter didn't bother. Go. He'd been up since 4. He'd changed a water pump on a landscaping truck at 5:30 in a driveway in Rock Hill, drunk gas station coffee at 6, and dropped his daughter at Ridgeway Elementary at 7:40 with her lunchbox and her library book and a promise he intended to keep. "You'll be there," Lily had asked, one hand on the car door. 3:15. "You said that on Tuesday. Tuesday was a transmission. Today's a boat." He'd reached over and straightened her backpack strap. Boats are easier. They don't want to be anywhere. And she'd given him the look 8 years old and already better at reading him than most adults he knew. And then she'd run for the doors, and he'd sat in the truck for a second the way he always did, watching until she was inside before pulling out into traffic with $311 in his checking account and a job on his phone that paid $1,200 just to show up. 90. Now he stood at a security gate in a $9 shirt holding a toolbox his father had carried out of the Charleston Naval Shipyard in 1987, and a kid in a polo shirt was looking at him like he'd wandered off a construction site. "Deliveries are around the back." Not a delivery. "Sir, this is a private facility." "Carter, Ethan Carter, I'm on the list. I'm on." The kid looked at the tablet, looked at Ethan, looked at the tablet again longer than necessary, and Ethan stood there and let him because he'd been standing in front of men like this his whole life and had learned a long time ago that the only way to lose was to get loud about it. "Huh," the kid said. "You are. Imagine that." The gate rolled open on a world Ethan had only ever seen from the outside of. He'd worked marinas before. Working marinas the kind with fish blood on the boards, and a bait cooler that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration, where a man in a wet t-shirt would hand you a beer at 9 in the morning and call you sir for the rest of your life if you got his diesel turning over. This wasn't that. This was white. White fiberglass, white uniforms, white awnings, white teeth. 50 men and women in matching navy jackets, with a logo stitched over the heart clustered around a boat that didn't look like a boat so much as a rumor about the future. 210 feet of it. Black hull, glass everywhere. Something on the aft deck under a tarp that Ethan was fairly sure was a helicopter. And laptops. God almighty, the laptops. Ethan counted 11 before he stopped counting. Rolling carts of them. Cables running out of the engine room hatches like IVs out of a patient in intensive care, and every screen showing something red. He'd seen a lot of engine rooms in his life. He'd never seen one on life support. "Excuse me, sir, sir?" A woman with a clipboard and an earpiece was moving toward him at an angle designed to head him off. "Ethan Carter, I know who you are." She said it the way you'd say, "I know what that stain is." "Ms. Langford will be down in a moment. Please don't touch anything." "Wasn't planning on it." "Please don't talk to the engineering team either." Ethan set the toolbox down on the dock. It made a sound, that solid, unapologetic chunk of 40 pounds of steel finding wood, and heads turned. He saw it happen in a wave. A man in a navy jacket nudged the man beside him. Somebody smiled. Somebody didn't bother to hide it. "That's fine," Ethan said. "I don't much like talking anyway." He'd gotten the call 4 days ago. Not from Langford Marine. From a man named Duke Mabry, 71 years old, who ran a boatyard in Georgetown and had employed Ethan for 6 summers when Ethan was young enough to think he'd be doing it forever. "Son," Duke had said, "you're gonna hang up on me." Probably. "There's a rich woman up in Charleston with a boat that won't run." There's a rich woman everywhere with a boat that won't run. $40 million, Ethan. Ethan had been under a Silverado at the time on his back on cardboard in his own driveway. Then she can afford somebody better than me. She's had 50 of them. A pause. Duke wheezing a little the way he did now. 50. Germans, Norwegians, boy from MIT with 2 doctorates. 6 weeks and that thing hasn't moved a foot. They're about to write it off. So they put out a call, open call. Anybody with a Marine certification and a pulse. It's a publicity stunt. Ethan, I ain't gonna lie to you. She wants a crowd. She wants to look like she tried everything before the insurance fight. Duke coughed. Pays $1,200 just to show up. $50,000 if you fix it. Ethan had lain very still under that truck. $50,000. 50p. He'd done the math without meaning to. He always did, and the math was this. 50,000 was the roof. 50,000 was Lily's teeth, the ones the orthodontist had circled on an X-ray in March, while Ethan nodded and said, "Let me look at my schedule," like a man who had a schedule. 50,000 was the difference between his daughter growing up watching her father worry about money and his daughter growing up not knowing what that sounded like. Duke. Yeah. Why me? And Duke Mabry, who had never once in 6 years told Ethan he was good at anything, said, "Because I've watched a lot of men listen to engines, and you're the only one I ever saw who heard 'em back." She came down the gangway at 9:04. Ethan knew it was 9:04 because he'd looked at his watch, and he'd looked at his watch because he was counting the hours to 3:15, and everything in his life ran on that clock now, whether the world knew it or not. Vanessa Langford was smaller than she looked on television. That was the first thing. On the news, she was a monument. Forbes covers the pale gray suits, the hair, like something engineered rather than grown. In person, she was maybe 5'4", and she moved like a woman who had never in her adult life had to wait for a door to be opened, and the crowd of engineers parted for her without anyone deciding to. She had a phone in her hand, and she was finishing a sentence into it. "Then tell Kessler that I'll take his call when the boat runs, and not 1 minute before." She lowered the phone. "Where is he?" 6 people pointed at Ethan. She turned. "Bendany." And Ethan watched it happen. Watched her eyes go down to the boots first, which were the wrong thing. The grease-black, salt-white, split-at-the-toe wrong thing. And then to the jeans. And then to the hands, which were the hands of a man who worked cracked at the knuckles, a thumbnail gone black from a slipped wrench in February. And then last to his face, which was where most people started. He'd seen that order of operations before. Boots, jeans, hands, face. And it never meant anything good. "You're the mechanic," she said. "Ethan Carter. Do you have any idea what that vessel is?" "Not really, no." Somebody laughed. Vanessa didn't. "That is the Aurelia," she said. $41 million. Hybrid propulsion twin MTU diesels, 4 megawatt-hours of battery, a distributed power architecture that does not exist anywhere else on the water. There are 9 patents in that engine room. 9. I have had the man who wrote 2 of them standing on this dock for 11 days. She gestured at the Navy jackets without looking at them. Carlson, Munich, Rotterdam. The consultancy I flew in from Oslo costs me $31,000 a day and has been here since the 14th of last month. That's a lot of days. 43. Her jaw moved. 43 days Mr. Carter and that boat has not turned a propeller. The launch was supposed to be in 9 days. I have investors flying in from Singapore who believe they are attending a christening, and instead they are going to attend a funeral, and I am standing on a dock at 9 in the morning talking to a man in... She stopped. Go ahead, Ethan said. Excuse me. You were going to say something about the boots. Go ahead, everybody does. The dock went quiet in a way it hadn't been a second before. Vanessa Langford looked at him for a long moment. Something crossed her face, not shame. She was a long way from shame, but a recalculation, the way a person looks at a dog that's just done arithmetic. My assistant tells me you responded to an open call, she said. That's right. My assistant also tells me the open call was intended for firms, not, she searched individuals. Didn't say that on the website? No, she agreed. It didn't. She turned to the clipboard woman. Priya, whose idea was the open call? Legal's, ma'am, for the insurance filing, to demonstrate exhaustive? Yes, fine. She turned back. So you understand, Mr. Carter, that you are here as a box being checked. I understand I'm here for $1,200. That got a real laugh from a couple of the engineers, and it wasn't a kind one, and Ethan let it roll off him the way he'd let 1,000 of them roll off him since he was 19 years old. But Vanessa didn't laugh. She tilted her head. You're honest, at least. Cheaper than the alternative. What's your certification? A BYC Marine Systems, diesel. I've got a commercial ticket and about 19 years. 19 years where? Georgetown, Mount Pleasant, little yard in Awendaw for a while, shrimp boats mostly, some tugs, whatever came in. Shrimp boats, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. And you believe that qualifies you to touch a hybrid propulsion system with 9 patents in it. And this is where Ethan Carter should have said no. He knew it. Standing there with the sun coming up hot off the white fiberglass and 50 of the best-paid engineers on the planet standing in a half-circle waiting for him to embarrass himself, he knew it. He had $1,200 coming just for the drive up. He could take it, get in the truck, be home by noon, spend the afternoon fixing the neighbor's mower, and be standing outside Ridgeway Elementary at 3:05 with time to spare. Then he made the mistake of looking at the boat. He hadn't really looked at it yet. He'd been busy being looked at. But now he looked and something in the back of his skull went tick quiet the way it did. Man, the engine room hatches were open, all 4 of them, and that was... that was strange. You didn't leave 4 hatches open on a hybrid unless you were fighting a heat problem, and you didn't fight a heat problem for 43 days unless you'd stopped believing it was a heat problem. And the cables. Somebody had run diagnostic cables into the hatches, sure, that made sense. But somebody had also run 3 of them out through the salon door up the stairs and out to a rolling cart on the aft deck, and that meant they weren't reading the engine anymore. They were reading the network. Which meant that somewhere in the last 6 weeks, 50 of the smartest people alive had quietly stopped asking what's broken and started asking what's lying. Ethan felt it go up his arms. That old feeling. The one he got at 2 in the morning under a boat when a thing that had been dark for hours suddenly went bright. Ma'am, he said slowly, can I ask you a question? No. When it stopped, did it stop, or did it decide to stop? Vanessa Langford's chin came up about a 1/4 inch. And behind her, a man in a navy jacket said, "Oh, for God's sake." "Mind so." He came out of the group. Big man, 60-ish, silver hair forearms like a man who'd actually worked once and had gotten far enough away from it to start dressing like he hadn't. The jacket said, "Carlson," over the heart. "Ms. Langford, with respect, we are 10 days from a launch, and you are letting a..." He made a small motion at Ethan, a flick like brushing lint. "A field technician interrogate you on your own dock." "Lars, no, I want to hear it. I want to hear the question." He turned to Ethan. His English was excellent, and his contempt was better. "Did it decide to stop? What is that? Is that poetry? Do you talk to the boat, sir? Does it talk back? Sometimes, Ethan said. Ah. Carlson spread his hands to the crowd. Sometimes. And they laughed. Really laughed this time. 40-some engineers on a sunlit dock in Charleston, South Carolina, laughing at a single father in split boots, and Ethan Carter stood in the middle of it with his hands at his sides and let them. Here's the thing nobody on that dock understood about him. He wasn't angry. He'd been angry once. 24 years old at a yard in Mount Pleasant, when a surveyor with a clipboard had overruled him on a bearing and Ethan had told him exactly what he thought and gotten walked to the gate for it. He'd been angry for a week. Then the boat had thrown a shaft off Bull's Bay with 4 men on it, and they'd gotten lucky, and the surveyor had never once said Ethan's name in the report. That was the day he'd learned it. Anger was a thing you spent, and he'd rather spend it on something that mattered. So he stood there, and he let them get it out of their system. And when it died down, and it always died down, that was the thing about laughter. It needed feeding. He said to Vanessa, not to Carlson. 43 days. I've said that. And in 43 days has anybody in a Navy jacket asked you a single question about what you did to it? Silence. Total, ringing seagull and halyard silence. Vanessa Langford's eyes narrowed by maybe a millimeter, and it was the first time all morning she'd looked at him instead of at his boots. What did you say? I said, has anybody asked you what you did? Ethan bent, unlatched the toolbox, the 2 catches went snap-snap, the loudest sound on that dock, and lifted out a flashlight. 'Cause I've been standing here 11 minutes, ma'am, and I've counted 50 engineers and 11 laptops, and about $400,000 a week in consulting fees, and every single one of them is looking at the engine. That is where the problem is, Carlson said. No, sir. Ethan straightened up. That's where the problem shows. He'd meant it flat. He'd meant it the way you'd say, that's a Ford. But it landed on that dock like a dropped tool, and something happened in the crowd, a shifting. 2 of the younger engineers looked at each other. One of them, a woman maybe 30, looked down at the deck and did not look back up. Ethan clocked her, filed it away. She knows something. Mr. Carter? Vanessa's voice had changed. It had gone very quiet, which was somehow worse than the loud. Do you understand who you are speaking to? Yes, ma'am. Woman who owns the boat. I built that boat. Then you're the one who knows what happened to it. I have told you. You've told me what they told you. He said it gently. That was the terrible part. He said it the way you'd tell a friend their headlight was out. Ma'am, 43 days is a long time to be told the same thing by 50 people who all got taught at the same schools. Nobody moved. Vanessa Langford stood on her own dock in front of her own people and her own $41 million failure, and for 4 full seconds she said nothing at all. Then she laughed. It was a short, ugly, disbelieving sound, and she pressed 2 fingers to her forehead like a woman with a migraine coming on, and when she dropped her hand, she was smiling, and the smile was a blade. You know what? She said. Fine. Ma'am, Priya said. No, fine. She turned to the crowd. Cameras still rolling, Marcus Good. Everybody hear this. She pointed at the Aurelia. She pointed at said, 50 of the most qualified engineers on Earth have had 43 days and $11 million of my money, and they have given me nothing. Nothing but invoices. And now this gentleman. She gestured at Ethan without looking at him. And there it was. The flick, the same flick Carlson had used, and Ethan understood suddenly that Carlson had learned it from her. This gentleman has driven up from Rock Hill in a pickup truck to explain to us all that we've been thinking about it wrong. She turned. So don't waste my time, Mr. Carter. And then, loud so the cameras would get it clean. If you're so confident, fix it. The dock exploded. Not applause, worse, delight. That awful champagne fizz of a crowd watching somebody get set up. Carlson was grinning. Somebody actually clapped twice sarcastically. A phone came up, then 6 phones, then 20. And Ethan Carter stood in the middle of it and thought about three things in this order. $50,000. Lily's teeth. $315. How long do I get? He said. The noise dropped a little. Vanessa blinked. What? How long? You gave them 43 days. What do I get? And Carlson, God bless him, couldn't help himself. Take the afternoon, he called out. Take a week. Take as long as you like. We have all been very entertained. More laughter. Ethan looked at his watch. He looked at the boat. 4 open hatches. Cables out the salon. A woman in a navy jacket at the back of the crowd who wouldn't lift her eyes. Then he looked at Vanessa Langford, and he said it not loud, not proud, just the plain flat truth of a man who'd already done the arithmetic. Ma'am, I only need an hour. The laughing stopped like somebody had cut a wire. I'm sorry, Vanessa said. What? An hour. If I'm wrong in an hour, I'll take my 1200 and I'll drive home and you'll never hear my name again. He picked up the toolbox. But I gotta be at a school at 3:15, so I'd like to start. Carlson's face had gone a color that didn't have a name yet. This is a circus. You said it, not me. Ms. Langford, I will not stand here while... Lars. Vanessa didn't take her eyes off Ethan. Be quiet. Because something had gotten to her. Ethan saw it. Later, he'd think a lot about that moment, about what exactly it was that had reached her when nothing else that morning had. It wasn't the confidence. She was surrounded by confidence. She paid 400 grand a week for confidence. It was the school. It was that he'd said it out loud in front of everyone without embarrassment, like it was a fact of the universe on the same shelf as the tide tables. I have to be at a school at 3:15. 50 men on that dock would have died before admitting they had somewhere more important to be than the Aurelia. And this one had just told her his daughter outranked her boat. 1 hour, Vanessa said. Ma'am, Priya again. 1 hour. She checked her own watch, a thin gold thing. It's 9:19. You have until 10:19. Nobody helps him. Nobody hands him a laptop. If he wants a wrench, he can use his own. Her mouth curled. You wanted to do it your way, Mr. Carter. Do it your way. Yes, ma'am. And when the hour's up and that boat is exactly as dead as it is right now, she stepped in close and dropped her voice so it was for him, and the nearest microphone only. You're going to stand right here and explain to every camera on this dock why a shrimp boat mechanic thought he was smarter than the men who built it. Ethan considered that. That's fair, he said. And that was when Vanessa Langford lost her footing for the first time in about 11 years because she'd expected him to flinch, and he'd agreed with her instead, and there is nothing in the world you can do with a man who agrees with you. Well, she said, go. Ethan didn't go. He set the toolbox back down. He looked around the dock past her, past Carlson, past all 50 of them, and he raised his voice for the first time that morning, just slightly, just enough to carry. Before I start, I need one thing. Carlson threw up his hands. Now he needs things. Not a tool. Then what? Vanessa snapped. Ethan turned back to her. I want the maintenance log, he said. Not the digital one, the paper one. Every yard ticket, every work order, every change request signed off in the last 18 months. He paused. Including the ones with your name on them. The gulls went on screaming. Nobody else made a sound. Vanessa Langford stood absolutely still, and something moved behind her eyes fast and gone, and at the back of the crowd, the young woman in the navy jacket who hadn't looked up all morning finally did. She looked at Ethan Carter. And she went white. The silence lasted long enough that somebody's phone buzzed and nobody laughed. The paper log, Vanessa repeated. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Carter, there is no paper log. There hasn't been a paper log on a commercial vessel in this country since roughly the year I was in graduate school. Everything is in the maintenance system. Every work order, every part number, every technician's login time-stamped and immutable. Then it'll be easy to print. That is not the point. It's kind of my point, ma'am. Carlson made a noise in his throat that was meant to be a laugh and came out closer to a cough. Ms. Langford, I have to say this out loud because in 11 days, nobody on this dock has been willing to say anything out loud. We are now 9 minutes into a 1-hour exercise, and this man has not looked at the boat. He has asked for paperwork. Paperwork. If the answer were in the paperwork, we would have found it in the first week. Did you read it? Ethan asked. I beg your pardon. The first week. Did you read the work orders? We reviewed the maintenance history, yes, obviously. That's not what I asked. I asked if you read them. Carlson turned to Vanessa, with his palms up like a man appealing to a referee. This is the interrogation now. This is what we have come to. Answer him, Vanessa said. That got her a look from Carlson that she pretended not to see. And Ethan filed that away too, right next to the young woman at the back of the crowd who was now studying the dock boards like they owed her money. We pulled the history into the diagnostic, Carlson said stiffly. The system flags anomalies. The system flagged nothing. So the answer is no. The answer is that a modern maintenance database is not a novel, Mr. Carter. One does not sit down with a cup of coffee and read it. That's a shame, Ethan said. That's how I'd have done it. 9:22. Priya was already talking into her earpiece low and fast, and after a second she covered the mic and said, Ma'am, the archive is in Georgetown. The physical yard tickets from the refit they went to storage when we consolidated. It's 90 minutes each way. So it's 180 minutes, Vanessa said, and he has 58. Yes, ma'am? Well, Vanessa turned back to Ethan, and her mouth did the thing it had done before the curl that had probably ended careers. It seems the universe agrees with Lars. You may have your paperwork, Mr. Carter, at approximately 12:30, which is 2 hours after you'll have stopped being my problem. Anything else? A cup of coffee, a sandwich. Would you like to interview my accountant? The doc laughed, and Ethan let it go by him like weather. I'll take the digital, he said. You just told me the digital was worthless. I told you 50 people looked at the digital. That's different. He crouched by the toolbox, snapped the catches, and came up with nothing but a legal pad and a pen with a hardware store logo on it. And somewhere behind him a man said, "Oh, come on," with real feeling. Print it. Don't filter it. Don't sort it by relevance. Don't pull the anomalies. Don't give me the summary somebody's assistant made. Every line item, 18 months in the order it happened. That's 400 pages, Priya said. Then you better start printing. Priya looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at Ethan for a long moment, and then she said, "Do it," and turned and walked 8 steps away and stood with her back to the whole thing, and Ethan understood that she was not walking away because she'd lost interest. She was walking away because for 1 second there she'd wanted to see what he'd find, and she'd hated herself for it. 9:26. Meh. He went aboard. Nobody helped him. That was the rule, and they kept it like it was scripture. 40-some engineers standing on the dock watching a man in split boots climb a gangway onto a $41 million vessel with a legal pad under his arm and a flashlight in his back pocket. Somebody was narrating it quietly for a phone camera. Somebody else said something about a wrench and got shushed. Ethan went down into the engine room and stopped at the bottom of the ladder and did not touch anything for 4 straight minutes. He just stood there. Up on the dock, Carlson checked his watch twice. "What is he doing?" Vanessa said. Priya leaned to the hatch and looked down and came back. "Standing, ma'am." "Standing." "Yes, ma'am." "For 4 minutes." "Yes, ma'am." What Ethan was doing was this. He was letting his eyes adjust and his ears open, and he was building the room in his head the way he'd built every engine room he'd ever been in from the sound of it, because a room tells you things before a screen ever will. He could hear the shore power humming. He could hear a bilge pump cycling somewhere forward, which was fine, that was normal. He could hear the fans. That was the thing. He could hear the fans. 4 hatches open and the ventilation fans still running on a boat that had been dead for 43 days, and Ethan Carter stood at the bottom of that ladder with the hair coming up on his forearms and thought, well now, who told you to keep breathing? He climbed halfway back up and put his head out. Who's got the keys? There are no keys, Carlson said. It is a distributed power architecture. There is a system. Who's got the system? I do, said the young woman at the back. Every head turned. She was maybe 30, and she had a tablet clutched against her chest like a shield, and her voice had come out about half the volume she'd clearly intended. Reyes, Carlson said. That's not necessary. He asked who had the master authority. And I said it was not necessary. Sir, he asked. Ethan looked at her, and she looked at him, and something passed between them across 40 feet of sunlight that neither of them would have been able to name. What's your name? He said. Nora Reyes. Miss Reyes, who told the ventilation fans to keep running. She opened her mouth. One Carlson said, the fans run on a standing schedule. It is a safety interlock. Battery compartments are not permitted to sit unventilated. This is in the manual, Mr. Carter, on page 400, and something I can have it printed for you along with your novel. That's a good answer, Ethan said. Thank you. It's just not the one I asked for. 9:31. He went back down. For the next 11 minutes, he did things that made no sense to anybody watching, and the phone stayed up the whole time. He laid a hand flat on the block of the port engine and left it there for a full minute. He did the same on the starboard. He got down on the deck plates on his back, which cost him a shirt he liked, and he ran 2 fingers along the underside of a coolant line and looked at the fingers and smelled them. He unhooked one diagnostic cable, held it up, looked at the connector, and plugged it back in exactly where it had been, and then he found the salt. It was nothing. It was a bloom of white about the size of a fingernail on a bracket bolt 3 feet outboard of the starboard heat exchanger, and Ethan Carter looked at it for a long, long time. And then he took out his phone and took a picture of it, and then he sat back on his heels and started laughing. Not loud, but the engine room carried it and the hatch carried it, and up on the dock 43 people heard a man laughing inside a boat that hadn't run in 6 weeks. What is funny? Carlson called down. Please, share it. Ethan came up the ladder. Miss Reyes, he said. Come here a second. She will not, Carlson said. Ms. Langford said nobody helps me. I'm not asking for help. I'm asking her a question. Vanessa had turned back around. Ask it from there. Yes, ma'am. Ethan looked at Nora Reyes. When did the starboard exchanger get pulled? Nora Reyes did not answer. She didn't have to. Ethan watched her face do it for her, watched the exact moment a 30-year-old engineer with a doctorate realized that a man who had been aboard for 15 minutes had just asked the question she had been swallowing for 6 weeks. It didn't, Carlson said. Nothing has been pulled. That is the whole point. The vessel is factory. It has 109 hours on it. It is a new boat, Mr. Carter. It is not a shrimp boat with 40 years of somebody's grandfather's improvisation on it. Sir, that bracket bolt's been off. That is absurd. It's got a wrench flat on it, and the paint's broke on one side, and there's salt sitting in the brake. Ethan held up his phone. Salt takes time. That bolt's been off and back on with the boat in the water, and it wasn't done at the factory, because at the factory, this boat was on a hard stand in Italy. Somebody in a navy jacket said very quietly, "Oh." Carlson's head snapped toward the sound. 9:38. Print the log, Ethan said to the dock at large. Please. It's printing, Priya said. How much of it? They're on page 90. Bring me 90. Sir, It's not in order, the printers. And Priya stopped because Vanessa had lifted one hand about 2 inches. Bring him 90 pages, Vanessa said. A kid in a polo shirt ran. There was something almost funny about it. A young man in $300 loafers sprinting up a dock because a mechanic asked for paper, and Carlson watched him go with an expression that had stopped being contempt somewhere in the last 4 minutes and had not yet decided what it was going to be instead. Ms. Langford, Carlson said, may I speak to you privately? No. Vanessa. I said no, Lars. This is theater. He has found a bolt. Congratulations. In an engine room with 11,000 fasteners, he has found one that somebody touched, and from this he will construct a story, because that is what these people do. They construct stories, and you are standing here on your own dock in front of your own investors' cameras, letting him do it. These people, Vanessa repeated. You know what I mean. I'm not sure I do. And that was the first crack. Ethan saw it from the gangway, saw it plain as a hairline in a weld. She hadn't decided anything yet. She still thought he was a clown. But Carlson had said these people and something in Vanessa Langford, some part of her, that she had spent 30 years building over and paving and putting a garden on top of, had heard that and gone very still. The kid came back with 90 pages. Ethan sat down on the deck, right there. Not on a chair, not at a table, not in the air-conditioned salon 40 feet away with its leather and its glass. He sat down cross-legged on the gangway with a stack of warm paper in his lap and a hardware store pen in his hand, and he started to read. 9:41. He's reading, Priya said. I can see that. Ma'am, he has 38 minutes. I can see that too. The doc got restless the way a crowd gets restless when the show stops. 2 engineers wandered off toward the coffee. Somebody put a phone away. Carlson started talking loudly to a group of 4 about thermal modeling, and the words came out clipped and fast and too loud for the size of the group, and Ethan heard about a third of it and understood the rest. He's scared. Ambiance. He turned a page, turned another. He was going faster than a man should be able to read 400 line items because he wasn't reading them. He was scanning for a shape the way you'd scan a beach for something that didn't belong. 9:46. Miss Reyes, he said without looking up. She'd drifted closer. She hadn't meant to. She was standing at the foot of the gangway now, with the tablet still clutched to her chest, and Carlson 12 feet behind her, and she said, yes. Line item 2:27. February 11th. What's a Delta 3? The tablet came up. Her hands were not steady. That's a change request classification. Delta 3 is a parameter change, software side. It's not a physical modification. Who signs a Delta 3? Chief engineer signs. Owner countersigns if it touches propulsion. Who's chief engineer? Silence. Ethan looked up. Nora Reyes was looking at Carlson. And Carlson was looking at Nora Reyes with an expression that Ethan Carter had seen exactly twice before in his life. Once on a foreman in Awendaw, and once on a man in a parking lot in Rock Hill, and both times it had meant the same thing, which was don't. Well, Ethan said, that's interesting. That means nothing, Carlson said. I sign 400 change requests a year. Every chief engineer on every vessel in this class signs 400 change requests a year. I didn't say anything, sir. You said interesting. It is interesting. 9:49. Ethan went back to the paper, and then he stopped. The doc felt it. That was the strange thing. The thing Nora Reyes would try to explain to her sister on the phone that night, and fail. 40-some people who were not paying attention anymore all somehow started paying attention at once, because a man sitting on a gangway had gone completely motionless with one finger on a line of text. Mr. Carter, Vanessa said. He didn't answer. Mr. Carter. He put the pen down. He put it down carefully, the way you set down something that might go off. "Ma'am," he said, "what happened on February 11th? "I have no idea. 15 months ago. I have 4 companies. "You signed something. "I sign 900 things a week. You signed this one." He held the page up. From the dock, it was just a page, just black lines on white, and Vanessa Langford stared at it from 20 feet away like it was a snake in the road. "Change request, 227, Delta 3, thermal management, and there's a note on it, and the note's got your initials on it." "What does it say?" Vanessa said. And Ethan Carter looked down at 90 pages of somebody's immutable time-stamped record and read out loud in a flat, plain voice on a dock in Charleston to 43 engineers and 11 cameras. "Approved. Reduce nuisance alarms before Monaco. VL." Nobody said anything. For a second, nobody even breathed, and then Carlson said too fast, "That is routine." "Is it?" Ethan said. "Nuisance alarms are a known issue in pre-delivery. Sensors are conservative from the factory. They scream at you. Every owner in the world signs that request. It is the most common request in the industry." What did it change? A threshold. Which one? "Mr. Carter, I am not going to be cross-examined on a dock about a 15-month-old parameter file by a man who repairs shrimp boats." And Ethan said, "Miss Reyes, which one?" 9:51. Nora Reyes stood at the foot of that gangway with a tablet against her chest, and 43 people watching her and her boss 12 feet behind her, and Ethan watched her do the arithmetic that everybody does, eventually the arithmetic of what it costs to say a true thing out loud. He knew that arithmetic. He'd done it at 24 with a surveyor and a bearing, and he'd gotten walked to the gate for it, and 4 men had almost died anyway. "Miss Reyes," he said gently, "it's just a number." She said, "Coolant Delta T on the starboard exchanger." "Reyes," Carlson said. It was set at 6 degrees. The request moved it to 11. "Reyes." "It's in the file, Lars. He's holding the file. What am I supposed to?" And her voice cracked, and she stopped, and Ethan Carter watched a woman with a doctorate from a school he couldn't have spelled stand on a dock and shake. "That's a big move," Ethan said. "It's within spec." "Sure. Is it within spec on a boat with 240 batteries under the deck plates?" Nobody answered. 9:53. Vanessa Langford said, "Somebody explain that to me in English." And it was Carlson's job to answer, and Carlson didn't, and the silence went on 1 second too long, and then 2, and Ethan saw Vanessa's head turn toward her chief engineer with a slowness that was worse than any shout. "Lars, Vanessa, this is not the place." "Lars, in English." Ethan said, "Ma'am, I'll do it if he won't." "No." She held up a hand without looking at him. "Him." Carlson's jaw worked. 12 feet away, his own junior engineer was staring at the ground. 40 men in matching jackets were staring at him. And Lars Carlson, who had written 2 of the 9 patents in that engine room, said, "The sensor was reporting a temperature difference it was not designed to tolerate. We widened the tolerance." Why? Because it was reporting it constantly, Vanessa, every 11 minutes. In Monaco, you had 140 guests coming aboard, and a system that was going to scream at them all night. So you turned it off. We did not turn it off, You turned it off. Dog. We adjusted a threshold on a sensor that was doing exactly what a factory sensor does, which is complain, and you signed it, in 90 seconds. Vanessa, I sent it at 4 in the afternoon, and it came back at 4:01. So please do not stand on this dock and perform astonishment for the cameras. The dock had gone absolutely silent. Vanessa Langford did not move. Vanessa. And Ethan Carter, sitting on a gangway with 90 pages in his lap, thought there it is and felt no satisfaction at all. That was the part nobody understood about him either. He'd been right a lot in his life. It never once felt good. It just felt like the room finally getting quiet enough to work in. "Mr. Carter," Vanessa said. Her voice had gone somewhere far away. "Is that why my boat won't start?" "No, ma'am." Her head came around. No, ma'am. Your boat starts fine." At 9:56. Somebody actually laughed one bark and choked it off. "What did you say?" Carlson said. Ethan stood up. He set the 90 pages down on the gangway and put his flashlight on top of them so the breeze wouldn't take them, and he came down onto the dock and he said it again to Vanessa plainly. "Your boat starts fine. It's been starting fine for 43 days. It just won't stay started, and there's a difference, and every one of these fellas has been treating it like there isn't." "That is not what happened," Carlson said. "It faulted at sea. It faulted with me aboard. It dropped propulsion at 11 knots and went to 0, and we were towed in, and you were not there, so do not tell me what happened." "How many times did you try to restart her?" "That is not." "How many times, sir?" "Twice. And it started both times." Carlson said nothing. "It started both times," Ethan said. "And it ran and then it quit again. And after the second time, you stopped trying because you're a smart man, and you knew what it meant. And the thing you knew has been sitting on your chest for 6 weeks. You have no idea what you were talking about." "Then tell me I'm wrong about the fans." "What?" "The vent fans. They've been running 43 days on a dead boat. Somebody could have killed them with a breaker in about 4 seconds, and nobody did. And you're telling me nobody in a Navy jacket noticed that in 6 weeks?" Ethan looked around the dock, at all of them, at the coffee cups and the tablets, and the $400,000 a week. "Y'all noticed. You noticed on day 2. You've been keeping air moving under that deck because you're all scared of what's under there, and not one of you would say the word out loud in front of the woman writing the checks." 9:58. Vanessa Langford said in a voice like a door closing, "What word?" And 43 engineers looked at the deck. "Ma'am," Ethan said, "it's not a fault, it's a protection. That boat's been shutting itself down on purpose. 43 days over and over, and every time it does it, it's trying to tell somebody something, and you all keep asking it why it's broken." He shook his head. "It's not broken. It's the only thing on this dock that's been telling the truth." "Then why won't it run?" Vanessa said. "Because it doesn't trust its own eyes anymore." Ethan pointed at the paper on the gangway. "You blinded one sensor to keep it quiet for a party in Monaco. Fine. Happens. But that sensor talks to the other ones. And when the network figured out that one of its own was lying, it did exactly what it was built to do, ma'am. It stopped believing all of them. And a system that can't believe its own instruments won't turn a propeller. Not for me, not for him, not for you." "That's not possible," Carlson said, and it came out thin. "It's 10 till," Ethan said. "Go get the rest of my pages." And Priya, who had not moved in 9 minutes, said, "Sir, there's a problem with the pages." Everybody turned. She was holding the printout. All of it now, the full 400, warm and heavy in both arms, and her face had gone the color of the fiberglass. "What kind of problem?" Vanessa said. "Pages 218 through 231, Priya said. "They're not there." "Printer jam," somebody offered. "No, sir. The system printed a placeholder. It says the records were deleted." She swallowed. "It says they were deleted 6 weeks ago." Ethan Carter went very still. "6 weeks ago," he said. "Yes, sir." "That'd be right around the time she faulted at sea." "Yes, sir. 2 days after. And on a dock in Charleston, South Carolina at 9:59 in the morning, with 11 cameras rolling and 50 of the best engineers in the world standing in the sun." Ethan Carter turned around and looked at Lars Carlson. And Lars Carlson was already looking at the water. 10 o'clock came and went, and nobody said anything about the clock. "Read it again," Vanessa said. Priya turned the page toward her. "It says record removed under retention policy. Deleted May 29th. May 29th. Yes, ma'am. The boat faulted on the 27th. Yes, ma'am. Vanessa Langford stood in the middle of her own dock and looked at 43 people in navy jackets, and not one of them looked back at her. Lars, she said, I did not delete anything. I didn't ask you a question. You were going to. Yes, Vanessa said. I was. Ethan stayed where he was. He'd learned that a long time ago in a yard in Awendal, watching two men who owned a business figure out in public that they were about to stop owning it together. You don't step into that. You let it happen, and you keep your hands where people can see them. The retention policy is automatic, Carlson said. 60 days on diagnostic captures, 30 on raw sensor dumps. It is in the system architecture, Vanessa. It was in the architecture before that boat was in the water, because you have a fleet and you cannot store 4 terabytes a week for every hull forever, and you signed that policy too. 14 pages, Priya said quietly. Carlson turned. What? It's 14 pages, sir. 218 through 231. If it were the retention policy, it would be thousands of pages. It's 14. She swallowed and looked at Vanessa, and Ethan watched her decide something. It's 14 consecutive change records, ma'am. Somebody selected them. 10:02. Somewhere out past the breakwater, a shrimp boat was working, and Ethan could hear it, a big, slow diesel with a bad injector on number 3, that its owner probably knew about and couldn't afford, and for 1 second, he wanted to be on that boat so badly, it was a physical thing in his chest. Who has delete authority? Vanessa said. Priya didn't answer. Priya. Chief engineer, Priya said, and owner. So Lars and me. Yes, ma'am. Well, I didn't delete them. No, ma'am. So it was Lars. And Priya, 29 years old, 4 years out of Clemson, holding 400 pages of paper in both arms on a dock in front of 11 cameras, said, Ma'am, the log says it was you. Nobody moved. Ethan watched Vanessa Langford's face and saw exactly nothing happen on it, which told him more than anything else could have. He'd seen that before, too. That's not the face of a person who's been caught. That's the face of a person who's just realized the floor is somewhere other than where they've been standing. Say that again. The deletion was executed on the owner account. May 29th, 4:17 in the afternoon. Your login. I was in Zurich on the 29th. Yes, ma'am. I was in a room with the Swiss on the 29th. I didn't touch a computer for 11 hours. Yes, ma'am, I know. I was there. And then Priya said the sentence that broke the morning open. Ma'am, you have a delegate. 10:04. Vanessa Langford turned her head slowly and looked at Lars Carlson. And Lars Carlson looked back at her, and Ethan Carter thought, well, there it is again, twice in 10 minutes. You signed it, Carlson said, 18 months ago. Owner delegate authority, propulsion and thermal, so that I could keep 4 vessels moving without waiting for you to land somewhere with signal. You signed it because you were tired of being woken up at 3 in the morning to approve a bolt, Vanessa. So when I signed change 227 in 90 seconds, you did not sign change 227. The dock made a sound. 43 people all inhaling at once. My initials are on it, Vanessa said. He read them out loud, 10 minutes ago, in front of every camera on this dock. VL. Yes. Then explain to me. I signed it as you, Carlson said. That is what a delegate is. That is what the word means. You gave me your name so that you would not have to read 400 requests a year, and for 18 months you have been very happy about that arrangement. And now there are cameras. At 10:05. Ethan looked down at the deck boards for a second. He hadn't wanted that. That was the thing nobody was ever going to believe about him. Not the reporters, not the comment sections, not the men who'd make him a hero by Thursday. He hadn't wanted that. Because he'd watched her hear it, and she'd heard it the way you hear a doctor. Ms. Langford, he said. Not now. Ma'am, it's 10:05. I said not now. Yes, ma'am. She stood there for 4 more seconds. Then she said without turning around, 14 minutes, Mr. Carter. Yes, ma'am. Is that going to be enough? No, ma'am. Of course not, Carlson said. It's not going to be enough, Ethan said, because I've spent 9 of my 60 minutes standing on a dock watching y'all find out who you work for. I'd like the 9 back. Vanessa turned around, and she almost smiled. It was a terrible thing, that almost. Ethan would think about it later. No, she said. Ma'am. You don't get the 9 back. Nobody gets the 9 back. That's not how it works. And you know it's not how it works. She checked the thin gold watch. 14 minutes. Go. 10:06. He went. He hit the ladder into the engine room with his shoulder and didn't feel it, and he was talking before his boots hit the plates. Miss Reyes, you coming or not? Up on the dock, Nora Reyes said, Ms. Langford said nobody helps. I'm not asking for help. I'm asking you to stand somewhere and answer questions, and if that's help, then this whole thing's been rigged from the jump, and everybody here knows it. 2 seconds. Then Vanessa Langford said go. Ma'am. Go Reyes. 10:07. Nora Reyes came down that ladder like a woman going over a wall. What do you need? Tell me about the latch. What latch? Miss Reyes. Ethan was already on his knees at the starboard exchanger with the flashlight in his teeth, and he took it out to talk. You've got a distributed system. 40-some nodes on a bus, all of them voting. When one of them lies, the rest quarantine it. That's a latch. Where does it live and what clears it? She stared at him. How do you know that? 'Cause that's how a boat with 240 batteries under the floor has to be built, or it kills people. He got the flashlight back in his teeth and got 2 fingers behind the bracket. Where does it live? Node local, non-volatile. It doesn't clear on a power cycle, that's the whole point. You can't reboot your way out of a safety latch. So, what clears it? A validated calibration event. Meaning somebody has to physically prove the sensor is telling the truth, with a reference, a traceable one. Her voice was going faster now, catching up with itself. You put a known standard against it, you enter the reference value the node compares, and if the delta's inside tolerance, it releases the quarantine and re-enrolls to the bus. Ethan pulled his hand back. There was a smear of white on his fingers. That's what I thought, he said. Mr. Carter, that's a factory procedure. It needs the Carlson tooling. The reference probe is a $19,000 instrument, and it lives in Munich. Does it? Yes. Miss Reyes, what does the node want? Not what does the manual want. What does the node want? She opened her mouth, closed it. A number, she said slowly. It wants a number and a signature. That's what I thought, Ethan said again, and he reached into his father's toolbox, and he came out with a glass thermometer. 10:09. Nora Reyes looked at it for 3 full seconds. That's a thermometer. Yes, ma'am. That's a glass thermometer. It's a laboratory glass thermometer with a NIST traceable certificate that my daddy got out of the Charleston Naval Shipyard in 1987, and it has been recertified every 3 years since, twice by him and 8 times by me, and the last one was in November, and the paper's in the lid of that box. He held it up to the work light. It's accurate to 1/10 of a degree, and it has never in 39 years needed a firmware update or an internet connection or a $19,000 case, and it does not care who signs anything. Vaya. Nora Reyes made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Carlson's going to lose his mind. Yeah, Ethan said. Probably. 10:11. Talk to me while I work. 227 moved the Delta T from 6 to 11. That's the request y'all keep calling routine. Fine. What's the second one? Nora went still. What second one? Miss Reyes. There's no second one. There's 14 pages missing out of a 400-page log, and every one of them is a change record, and they got pulled 2 days after that boat quit at sea. He had the bracket nut moving now, quarter turn, and it came easy, way too easy, the way a nut comes when somebody's had it off in the last 90 days. Nobody deletes 14 pages to hide one thing they did 15 months ago. They delete 14 pages to hide what they did about it. Silence. Miss Reyes, I could lose my license. Yes, ma'am, you could. That's it. That's the speech. Ethan set the nut in his palm and looked at her. Miss Reyes, I'm 35 years old and I make $41,000 a year, and I've got a daughter who needs braces, and a roof that's got about one more winter in it, and I'm not going to stand here in a 100-degree engine room and tell you what it's worth to you to say a true thing out loud. I don't know what it's worth to you. He turned back to the bracket. I know what it cost me. 24 years old, I told a surveyor a bearing was bad. He walked me to the gate. 6 weeks later, that boat threw a shaft off Bull's Bay with 4 men on it, and they got lucky, and my name's not in the report anywhere. Did you regret it? Every day for about a year. And then one of them fellas came into the yard in Georgetown and bought me a beer, and he never said what for, and I never asked. Ethan got the bracket free. That was 14 years ago. I've thought about it every week since. You do the math on that however you want. 10:13. Nora Reyes said, change 241. Ethan didn't stop working. May 29th, 4:11 in the afternoon, 6 minutes before the deletion. Her voice had gone very flat, the way people's voices go when they've stopped fighting themselves. Somebody reverted 227, put the threshold back to 6, clean, like it had never been touched. On the owner account. On the owner account. So the file looks factory. The file looks perfect, Mr. Carter. That's the part nobody understands. If you pull that boat's parameter set today, it is byte for byte, identical to what Ferretti shipped. That's why 50 people couldn't find it. There's nothing to find. The file is clean. And Ethan Carter, on his knees on a deck plate with a bracket in one hand, started laughing again. What? Nora said. What is funny? What is funny about that? Miss Reyes. He wiped his forehead with his wrist and left a black streak there. That's the murder weapon. 10:15. Say that again? The node had the sensor quarantined. Fine. It's been sitting there since the 27th going, I don't believe that thing, somebody prove it to me. That's not a fault. That's a machine doing its job. He was moving now fast, both hands. Then 2 days later, somebody logs in and changes the number back. And what does the node see? Nora Reyes went white. Oh my God. Say it. It sees the calibration change while the quarantine's latched. And what does that mean to it? It means the bus is compromised. She had both hands on her head. It means somebody's editing the sensor while it's under investigation. That's the one thing the architecture is built to survive. That's the malicious actor case. That's, oh my God. Lars. Now say the whole thing. It escalated the quarantine to the bus. She was almost whispering. It stopped trusting everything. Not the sensor. Everything. Every node. That's why it starts and quits. It boots, it pulls, it can't establish trust. It shuts down propulsion. It's been doing it 43 times a day for 6 weeks, and we've been reading it as a fault code. Yes, ma'am. We flew a man in from Rotterdam. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Carter, that boat has not been broken for 1 second of the last 43 days. No, ma'am, Ethan said. It's been scared. 10:17. Reyes. Carlson's voice came down the hatch like something dropped. Nora Reyes closed her eyes. Reyes, come up, now. She didn't move. Nora. And Nora Reyes, 30 years old, 4 years at Carlson Marine Systems, called up through the hatch in a voice that shook the whole way, and did not stop. Lars, what's change 241? Nothing. The engine fans, the gulls, the shrimp boat out past the breakwater with its bad injector. Nothing. Lars? Come up here. Answer me and I'll come up. 10:18. Ethan had the sensor in his hand. Yay, it was nothing. It was a stainless probe the length of his little finger with a 2-wire lead and a part number on it, $40 of hardware in a $41 million boat. And he held it up in the work light and looked at it the way you look at a witness. Miss Reyes, I need water. What? Fresh water, a bucket, and ice if there's ice. There's a galley. There's hang on. And she was gone up the ladder, and Ethan heard her hit the deck running and heard somebody say, "What are you doing?" and heard her not answer. He had 1 minute left. He sat down on the deck plate with his back against the block of a 9-patent hybrid propulsion system and looked at his phone. 2 bars. A photo of a girl with a gap in her teeth holding a fish that was too small to keep. 3:15. Mr. Carter. Vanessa Langford's voice from the top of the ladder. Yes, ma'am. It's 10:19. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Yes, ma'am. So your hour is up. Yes, ma'am, it is. Come up here. He came up. 10:20. 43 people on that dock, and not one of them was on a phone. Carlson was standing 8 feet from Vanessa with his arms folded and his face gone gray under the tan. Nora Reyes was coming back down the dock with a stainless galley bucket and a bag of ice in her arms, and she stopped dead when she saw everybody standing still. Vanessa Langford said, Well, ma'am, I know what's wrong with your boat. Everybody knows what's wrong with my boat, Vanessa said. I've had 50 people tell me what's wrong with my boat. I've got a folder on my desk 4 inches thick of people telling me what's wrong with my boat. What I do not have, Mr. Carter, is a boat that runs. No, ma'am. So can you fix it? Yes, ma'am. In the time you have left? No, ma'am. The dock made a noise. How long? 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Your hour is up. Yes, ma'am, it is. And Vanessa Langford stood there and looked at a man with a thermometer in his shirt pocket and grease on his forehead, and Ethan watched her do the same arithmetic Nora Reyes had done at the bottom of that ladder, and he understood suddenly that it was the same arithmetic, exactly the same, it just cost different money. Ms. Langford, Carlson said. It is over. He said an hour. It has been an hour. Let the man take his $1,200. Lars, you have investors landing in 9 days. Lars. Baby Saruderi. And I will say the other thing, Carlson said, because nobody else on this dock has the standing to say it. If you extend his hour in front of these cameras, you are telling the world that you believe a shrimp boat mechanic over 50 engineers, and that is a story that will follow this company for 10 years. You understand that. You are not a stupid woman. That is a story with a shape Vanessa and every reporter in this country already knows how it ends. 10:22. Vanessa Langford turned and looked at the Aurelia. Then she said, Mr. Carter, what's change 241? Carlson's arms came unfolded. Ma'am, Ethan said. I'd rather he told you. I'd rather you did. No, ma'am. Ethan shook his head. That's not ma'am, that's not me being noble. That's me telling you that in about 9 days, you're going to be standing in a room with people from Singapore, and one of 2 things is going to be true. Either your chief engineer told you the truth on this dock in front of 11 cameras, or a mechanic did it for him. He shrugged. One of those, you can survive. Nobody breathed. Vanessa Langford looked at Ethan Carter for a long, long moment. Then she turned around. Lars. Vanessa. What is change 241? 10:23. Lars Carlson, 61 years old. 2 of the 9 patents, $31,000 a day, stood on a dock in Charleston, South Carolina, and said, I put it back. You put what back? The threshold. The 6 degrees. His jaw was working. The boat faulted on the 27th. On the 29th, I flew home, and I sat in my kitchen at 1 in the morning, and I read 227, and I understood what I had done, and I logged in and I put it back. Why? Because I thought it would fix it. Don't, Vanessa said. Don't you do that. You asked me why. Man. You deleted 14 pages 6 minutes later. Lars, 6 minutes. If you thought it was a fix, you'd have called me from the kitchen at 1 in the morning, like you have called me from that kitchen 400 times in 18 years, and you didn't, and I want you to stand there and tell me why. 10:24. Carlson said quietly, because I have a daughter at Lund, and a boy who is not well, and I am 61 years old, and you were going to fire me. The gulls went on screaming. Nora Reyes set the bucket down on the dock, and it made a small sound, and everybody heard it. Lars, Vanessa said. Don't. Lars, I would not have. You would have, Carlson said. Vanessa, look at me. You would have. You fired Bertelsen for a gearbox. You fired the whole Rotterdam team in a phone call in April. You have never in 18 years asked me a single question you did not already have the answer to, and I have watched you sign 900 things a week for a decade so that you would never, ever have to know anything, and then you gave me your name so that you would not have to know that either. He was not shouting. That was the worst part. So no, I did not call you at 1 in the morning. I sat in my kitchen and I made it look like it never happened because that is what you built me to do, and I have not slept a full night since. 10:26. Vanessa Langford did not say anything at all. And Ethan Carter, standing there with his father's thermometer in his shirt pocket and 43 engineers around him and 11 cameras on his face, understood something that he would never once say out loud in any of the interviews that were coming. Nobody in this story was a villain. That was the thing. That was always the thing. He'd been in 300 engine rooms, and every single dead engine had a story, just like this one behind it. A man who was tired, a woman who was busy, a threshold. Somebody moved on a Thursday, a phone call. Nobody made. Machines don't get lied to by monsters. They get lied to by people who are scared and in a hurry, and they don't hold it against anybody, and they just sit there and quietly refuse to move until somebody comes down the ladder and tells them the truth. Ma'am, he said, it's 10:26. Vanessa didn't turn around. Ma'am, I need to say one thing, and then I need to go to work or go home. Say it. He's right about the story. Now she turned. What? He's right. The story's got a shape, and every reporter in the country knows how it ends. Ethan nodded at the cameras. Mechanic beats 50 experts. Rich lady learns a lesson. Y'all are already writing it. I can see it on your faces, and I'm telling you, it's a lie, ma'am, and I'd rather you heard it from me before you hear it from somebody with a microphone. A lie. Yes, ma'am. Ethan pointed at the boat. I didn't beat anybody. Miss Reyes knew about the latch, she just didn't have anybody to say it to. Mr. Carlson knew what he'd done on the 29th of May. He's known every day since he's been carrying it around like a stone. That boat's been screaming the answer 43 times a day for 6 weeks, and everybody heard it. He shook his head. The only thing I did that 50 engineers didn't do was walk in here with nothing to lose. That's it. That's the whole trick. I don't work for you. I can't be fired. I've got no title to protect and no daughter at Lund and nobody in Munich waiting to see how I handled it. So when the boat told me the truth, I could just say it. 10:28. Vanessa Langford said, "That's not nothing." "No, ma'am," Ethan said. "But it's not genius either. It's just cheap. It's cheap for me, to be honest, and it was expensive for him, and that's not a thing about him, ma'am." He held her eyes. "That's a thing about the dock." Nobody said a word. And then Vanessa Langford reached up and took off the thin gold watch and held it in her hand and looked at it. And took off the thin gold watch and held it in her hand and looked at it. And Ethan didn't understand why until she said, "Stop the clock. "Ma'am," Priya said, "stop the clock. There's no clock." She looked up and her voice came out and carried the length of that dock and probably halfway across the harbor. "There is no hour. There was never an hour. I made up an hour on a dock in front of cameras because a man in bad boots embarrassed me at 9 in the morning, and I wanted him to fail in a way that would be entertaining." She turned in a slow circle and looked at every one of them. 43 days, $11 million, 50 of you. And a man drove up from Rock Hill in a truck and found it in 59 minutes, and the reason he found it is that he was the only person on this dock who was allowed to. 10:30. "Mr. Carter." "Ma'am? What do you need?" Ethan looked at the bucket of ice on the dock. He looked at Nora Reyes, who was standing very straight with her chin up and her eyes wet and furious. He looked at Carlson, who was looking at the water. "I need Miss Reyes," he said. "I need that ice. I need a can of distilled water, and I need somebody to find me a stir stick, a wooden one, not metal." He paused. "And I need him." Carlson's head came up. "Him? Yes, ma'am." "Why?" "Because the node's going to ask for a signature," Ethan said, "and it's not going to take mine." 10:32. They stood there, the two of them, 61 and 35 patent holder and shrimp boat mechanic, 8 feet apart on a dock in Charleston. "You want me to sign it?" Carlson said. "I want you to read a thermometer and sign what it says." "After what I did." "Sir, I don't care what you did." Ethan picked up his toolbox. "I care what it is. That's all any of this ever was. Nobody's asking you to be a good man. I'm asking you to look at a number and write it down." Lars Carlson stared at him. And then, very slowly, he took off the navy jacket with his own name stitched over the heart, and he handed it to somebody, and he rolled his sleeves. "Show me the glass," he said. 10:34. They went down. It took 2 hours and 11 minutes. They ran the probe against the glass in an ice bath, and then in a bath they walked up in 10-degree steps off the galley kettle while Nora Reyes called out the node's raw counts, and at 52 degrees Celsius the thing lied by 4.1 degrees, and Carlson said a word in Swedish that Ethan didn't need translated. "There it is," Ethan said. "That's your 6. That's your 11. That sensor's been drifting since the day it left Italy, and it was telling you the truth about itself the whole time. And we widened the window so it would stop." "Yes, sir." "So it would stop telling us." "Yes, sir." 12:19. Carlson entered the reference values with 2 fingers, slowly reading each one off the glass out loud before he typed it, and Nora Reyes read them back, and Ethan Carter watched a 61-year-old man's hands shake on a keyboard. The node accepted at 12:31. Nora said, "It's re-enrolling." "How long?" "I don't know. Nobody's ever done this. This has never been done." She was laughing or crying, it was hard to say. "Mr. Carter, this has literally never been done." 12:40. They came up onto that dock, and there were 60 people on it now, because word gets around a marina faster than it gets around a family. And Vanessa Langford was standing exactly where she'd been standing 3 hours before. "Well," she said. Ethan Carter set down his father's toolbox. He looked at his watch. 12:41. School was at 3:15, and Rock Hill was 3.5 hours away, and he wasn't going to make it, and he'd known that since about 10. "Ma'am," he said, "start the engine." Carlson said, "Vanessa, if this does not." "Start it," Ethan said. Priya said, "Sir, who does it, does somebody." "She does," Ethan said, and pointed. "She built it. She signed it. She broke it. She starts it." Vanessa Langford stood there. Then she went up that gangway alone past 60 people in $1,100 shoes, and Ethan Carter watched her put her hand on a button she'd never once pressed herself in her life. 12:43. Nothing happened. For 1 full second, nothing happened, and a man in the back said, "Oh, come on!" And Carlson closed his eyes, and Nora Reyes grabbed Ethan's arm hard enough to bruise. And then $41 million of dead boat woke up under their feet like something coming out of the water, and every screen in that engine room went green one after another, all the way down the line. 60 people on that dock, and not one of them cheered. That was the thing Ethan Carter never forgot. He'd expected noise. A boat that had been dead for 43 days came alive under 60 pairs of feet, and the dock went absolutely completely silent, and it stayed silent for a good 4 seconds, because nobody there could quite believe their own ears. Then a kid in the back, one of the young ones, said "holy," and didn't finish it. And then it broke. 12:44. And it came all at once, a wall of 60 people who had spent 6 weeks losing shouting at the same time. Somebody threw a hat. 2 engineers grabbed each other by the shoulders like brothers. A man Ethan had never spoken to in his life came out of the crowd and hugged him hard enough to lift him off the boards, and Ethan stood there with his arms half up, not knowing what to do with any of it. Nora Reyes was crying and not bothering to hide it, and shouting numbers at nobody. Buses green, all 42 nodes, 42 of 42. Lars look. And Lars Carlson was not looking. Lars Carlson had both hands on the dock rail and his head down, and his shoulders were going, and Ethan Carter was the only person on that dock who saw it because everyone else was looking at the boat. 12:46. Up on the flybridge, Vanessa Langford still had her hand on the button. She hadn't taken it off. 60 people were screaming underneath her, and she was standing up there with one hand flat on a start button on a boat she'd built, listening to it run, and Ethan watched her face from the dock and thought that it looked less like triumph than like a woman getting a phone call she'd been dreading for 6 weeks and finding out everybody was fine. Then somebody yelled, "She's running, Miss Langford," and Vanessa Langford came back into her body all at once. "Priya. Ma'am. Get Singapore on the phone. Ma'am, it's 2 in the morning there. Get them on the phone." "Yes, ma'am." 12:48. Ethan Carter picked up his father's toolbox. He did it quietly. He'd found the thermometer's cap under a deck plate, and he'd wiped the glass on his shirt and put it back in the felt slot where it had lived since 1987. And he closed the lid and snapped the 2 catches, and the sound of them was completely swallowed by 60 people celebrating. He was 11 steps down the dock before anybody noticed. "Hey!" He kept walking. Hey, Mr. Carter." It was Nora Reyes running, holding a tablet against her chest with one arm, the way she'd held it all morning. "Where are you going?" "Rock Hill." "You're what?" She got in front of him. "You're leaving." "It's 10 till 1, ma'am." So it's 3.5 hours to Rock Hill, and school lets out at 3:15. He shifted the toolbox to his other hand. "I'm already 40 minutes late. If I go now, she's only standing out front an hour by herself instead of 2. "How?" Nora Reyes stared at him. "They're about to give you $50,000. They can mail it." "Mr. Carter." "Miss Reyes, I got a neighbor lady, Miss Odetta, she's 70-something, and she's got a Buick, and she'll go get her and Lily's fine. She's done it before, that's not—" And Ethan stopped because he heard how it sounded coming out of his own mouth. "She's done it before." 12:50. He stood there on a dock in Charleston with $41 million of boat running behind him and heard himself say, "She's done it before," and for 1 second, Ethan Carter hated his whole life. "Okay," he said. "Okay, excuse me." He got his phone out and walked 4 steps away and called, and it rang twice. "Ethan." "Miss Odetta, I'm going to ask you a favor." "Where are you?" "It sounds like a parade." "Charleston. Ma'am, can you get Lily at 3:15? She's at the front doors. She's got a green backpack." "Baby, I know what her backpack looks like. I've picked her up 9 times. Ethan closed his eyes. 9 times. "Ethan?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm here." "Is everything all right?" "Yes, ma'am. Everything's fine." "You sound funny. I'm fine, Miss Odetta. Tell her I'll be home by 7. Tell her. And he stopped again, and Nora Reyes was standing 12 feet away, pretending very hard to look at a tablet. Tell her the boat ran. Tell her the what ran. She'll know. 12:52. He hung up and stood there with the phone in his hand and did not turn around, and Nora Reyes said quietly behind him, 9 times. Ma'am, don't. I'm not doing anything. You're doing something. Mr. Carter, I'm just standing here. And then Priya's voice came down the dock sharp enough to cut through 60 people. Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter, Ms. Langford wants you. Ethan turned around. Vanessa Langford was coming down the gangway with her phone in her hand and her assistant behind her and 43 engineers parting for her, and she was looking straight at him, and the look on her face was not gratitude. It was something else. Ethan had seen it before once on a woman in a hospital hallway in 2019, and he'd hoped never to see it again. She stopped 6 feet away. Explain it to me, she said. 12:54. Ma'am, I've got... I know. Rock Hill, 3:15. I heard you the first 6 times. Her voice was tight. Explain it to me, Mr. Carter, right here, in front of all of them. Because in 9 days, I am going to stand in a room with people who gave me $200 million, and one of them is going to ask me what happened to that boat, and I am not going to stand there and say a man from Rock Hill fixed it. Explain it. Ma'am, it's not. Explain it. And the dock went quiet again, because 60 people had just heard a billionaire's voice crack in half in public. Ethan set the toolbox down. All right, he said. He looked around. 60 faces. 11 cameras, all of them up now, all of them pointed at him, and somewhere in Rock Hill, a 70-something woman with a Buick was picking up her keys for the 10th time. Your boat never broke, Ethan said. You said that already. Ma'am, I need you to actually hear it this time. He said it flat and kind, and it landed like a hand on a shoulder. Not as a line. It never broke. There's not a part on that vessel that failed. There's not a wire, not a bearing, not a board. If you'd towed that thing to a scrapyard tomorrow and cut it into pieces, you would not have found one single broken thing in it. And that's why 50 of the best people alive couldn't fix it, because you cannot fix a thing that isn't broken. That's not a failure of talent, ma'am. Every one of these folks is smarter than me. They were just answering a question that didn't have an answer. Then what was wrong with it? Somebody told it a lie, Ethan said, and it believed the person who told it. 12:56. Nobody moved. 15 months ago, there was a sensor on that starboard exchanger telling the truth. It was saying, hey, I'm reading a 5-degree spread and I don't like it. And it said that every 11 minutes day and night, because that's its whole job, that's the only thing it knows how to do. Ethan shrugged. And it was right, ma'am. We proved it this morning with a thermometer my daddy carried out of the naval yard the year I was born. That sensor's been drifting since Italy. It was never lying. It was the one honest thing in the room. And we widened the window. Yes, ma'am. To stop it talking. Yes, ma'am, before Monaco. Vanessa said, say the rest of it. Ma'am. You said you'd rather I heard it from you, so say the rest of it. 12:58. Ethan looked at Carlson. Carlson was standing at the rail with his sleeves still rolled and his jacket in somebody else's hands, and his face wrecked, and he met Ethan's eyes and gave him about a quarter of a nod. 2 days after she quit at sea. Ethan said, somebody put the number back. Why does that matter? Because of when? Ethan pointed at the boat. That note had already quarantined the sensor. It was sitting there saying, I don't trust this thing, somebody come prove it to me. That's not a bug, ma'am. That's the single best thing about that boat. That's the reason 240 batteries under your feet have never once cooked a guest. It was doing its job. And then while it was investigating, somebody reached in and changed the evidence. Ethan let that sit for a second. So what's it supposed to think? It's got one sensor under suspicion, and now somebody's editing that sensor's numbers in the middle of the investigation. There's exactly one thing that means to a machine built, the way that one's built. It means somebody's in here. It means the whole bus is compromised. Somebody in the crowd said, "Jesus." So it quarantined everything, Ethan said. Not the sensor, everything. 42 nodes. It stopped believing its own eyes, all of them, because it couldn't tell anymore which ones were real, and a machine that can't believe its instruments will not turn a propeller. Ever. For anybody. That's not a flaw, ma'am. That's the boat protecting the people on it from the people who own it. 1 o'clock. Vanessa Langford said, 43 days. Yes, ma'am. It's been sitting here for 43 days telling us that. 43 times a day, near as I can figure. And nobody. Everybody, Ethan said. Everybody heard it. She turned her head. What? Ma'am, that's what I keep trying to tell you. Ethan looked around at all those Navy jackets. The vent fans have been running for 6 weeks on a dead boat, 4 hatches open. Everybody down here knew there was a thermal event in the story somewhere. They all knew. Miss Reyes knew about the latch. She's known about the latch since about day 9. She told me the whole architecture in 90 seconds, standing at the bottom of a ladder. He nodded at her. She didn't need me. She needed somebody to say it to. Nora Reyes's face went red, and she looked at the deck. And him, Ethan said. Carlson didn't move. He's known since 1 o'clock in the morning on the 29th of May. Sat in his kitchen and worked it out by himself. No laptop, no diagnostic, no Rotterdam. He solved it before any of these people got on a plane. Ethan's voice stayed level. He solved it in 6 weeks, less than I did, and he's carried it around in his chest ever since. And the reason he didn't say it out loud, ma'am, is that he was scared of you. 1:02. The doc did not breathe. That's the whole thing, Ethan said. That's all of it. That's the entire 43 days and the $11 million right there. Nobody was stupid. Nobody was lazy. Nobody's a villain. Everybody on this dock knew a piece of it, and not one of them could afford to say their piece out loud, and the only reason I could is that I've got nothing you can take. Vanessa Langford said very quietly, "You could have taken the $50,000 and gone home." "Yes, ma'am. You could have let me believe you were a genius." "Yes, ma'am. Every man I've ever met would have taken that." "Ma'am, with respect." Ethan picked up his toolbox. "Every man you've ever met worked for you." 1:03. Something in Vanessa Langford's face came apart. Super. It was not dramatic. She didn't cry. She didn't put a hand to her mouth. She just stood there in the sun on her own dock, while 60 of her own employees watched, and Ethan saw the exact moment a woman who had spent 30 years never being wrong in public arrived at the end of that. "Lars," she said. Carlson lifted his head. "Come here." He came. 61 years old, walking 12 feet across a dock like it was a mile. On years. "I want you to hear this from me and not from a lawyer," Vanessa said. "You are not fired." Carlson's jaw moved. "You falsified a maintenance record on my vessel. You reverted a parameter without a work order. You deleted 14 pages of a compliance log under my name." She was counting them off, and her voice was absolutely steady. "The insurers are going to see all of it. The class society is going to see all of it. I am going to hand them every page myself on Monday morning, and there is going to be an investigation, and it is going to be ugly, and you may lose your ticket. I can't stop that. I wouldn't if I could. I know." "And you are not fired," Vanessa said, "because I gave you my name, Lars. I gave you my name so I wouldn't have to read 400 pages a year. And then I punished 400 people for 18 years for bringing me bad news. And then I acted surprised on a dock in front of cameras when a man had to be shamed by a mechanic into telling me the truth." 1:05. "Vanessa," Carlson said. "Yeah. I'm not finished. If I fire you today, every person standing on this dock learns the exact lesson you already learned. They learned that the safe thing is to sit in the kitchen at 1 in the morning and make it look like it never happened. Her chin came up. So no, you're going to stand in front of the class society and you're going to say what you did out loud. And I am going to stand next to you and say what I did. And we are going to find out together what that costs. Carlson said, "You will not survive that." Probably not. The Singapore money. We'll do what it does. Vanessa, you have $200 million. I know what I have, Lars. And then quieter. I also know what it cost. I just found out this morning. 106. Nobody on that dock said a word. Ethan Carter took 2 steps backward because this wasn't his. None of this had ever been his, and he had 211 miles between him and a girl with a green backpack. He got about 9 feet. "Mr. Carter." He stopped. "Ma'am, I really do have to." "I know." Vanessa turned around. "One question." "Yes, ma'am." "This morning, when I said don't waste my time." She swallowed. "Why didn't you leave?" Ethan stood there. Muscle, 60 people, 11 cameras, 100-degree dock, and a boat running behind him, and his father's toolbox in his right hand, and Ethan Carter told the truth, because at that point, it was the only thing he had left in stock. "Because of the $1,200, ma'am." Vanessa blinked. "I'm sorry. $1,200 to show up. That's what the ad said." He shifted the box. "Ma'am, that's my whole roof. That's not a figure of speech. There's a spot over the back bedroom that's been coming through since February, and I've had a tarp on it since February, and I've been putting $80 a month in an envelope in a drawer since February, and I've got $440 in there, and $1,200 was the number that made the tarp come off." Nobody moved. "So when you told me not to waste your time," Ethan said, "I wasn't being brave, ma'am. I was doing arithmetic. That's all it ever was. That's all it ever is." 108. Vanessa Langford said, "And the 50,000. "Braces," Ethan said. "Orthodontist circled him in March, told him I'd check my schedule." He almost smiled. "Like I've got a schedule." Something happened in the crowd. It was small. It was one of the young engineers, one of the ones who'd laughed at 9 in the morning, and he turned his face away and put a hand over his eyes for about 2 seconds, and then put it down, and Ethan didn't see it. But Vanessa did. "Mr. Carter," she said, "what time does she get out?" 3:15. "And what time is it?" 1:08. "And how far is Rock Hill?" 3.5 hours, ma'am. I'm not going to make it. I got a neighbor going." He said it evenly. "It's fine. It's not the first time." "How many times?" "Ma'am." "Mr. Carter, how many times?" And Ethan Carter, who had stood on that dock at 9 in the morning and let 50 engineers laugh at his boots without so much as blinking, could not answer that question. He tried. He opened his mouth. 9, Nora Reyes said. 1:10. Everybody turned. "He called her from right there," Nora said, pointing, 18 minutes ago, and the lady on the phone said she'd done it 9 times and he had to sit down. She was shaking. "He didn't sit down. He wanted to. I watched him not sit down." "Miss Reyes," Ethan said. "No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but we've had..." And her voice went completely, and she got it back. "We've had 50 people on this dock for 6 weeks, and every single one of us is on per diem at a hotel with a pool, and he drove up here this morning for $1,200, and he's leaving before the check clears, because a 3rd grader's going to be standing at a door." 111. Vanessa Langford looked at Ethan for a long moment. Then she said, "Priya." "Ma'am, the helicopter." Priya said, "Ma'am, it's under the tarp, we haven't." "Is the tarp glued on?" "No, ma'am." "Then take it off. Where's Dario?" Sleeping. Probably he hasn't flown in 6 weeks. Wake him up. Vanessa checked the thin gold watch she'd taken off 2 hours ago and was holding in her hand. Rock Hill. What is that 200 miles? 211? Ethan said. 50 minutes, Priya said slowly. Maybe 55. He'd need a place to put down. There's a middle school field, Ethan heard himself say, and then stopped because what in God's name was he doing? Ma'am, Priya said, I'd have to call the county. You can't just. Then call the county. Ms. Langford. Priya. Vanessa said, in 18 years have I ever once asked you to do something impossible and been wrong? No, ma'am. Then call the county. 113. Ethan Carter said, ma'am, no. Vanessa turned. Excuse me. No, ma'am, thank you, no. 60 people made a sound at once, and Ethan raised his voice over it for the second time that day. Ma'am, listen to me. Listen. He set the toolbox down. If I come down out of the sky in a helicopter and land on a ball field and get my kid, what has she learned? Nobody answered. She's learned her daddy's important when a rich lady says he is. Ethan shook his head. That's the whole thing, ma'am. That's the thing I've been trying to say all morning, and I keep saying it wrong. I'm not any different at 1 o'clock than I was at 9. Same boots, same box, same $41,000 a year. The only thing that changed at 12:43 is that y'all changed, and I'm not going to teach that little girl that a man's worth is a thing that gets handed to him at a marina. 115. Vanessa Langford said quietly, Then what do you want? I want to drive home, Ethan said. I want to get there at 4:30, and I want to find her at Miss Odetta's doing homework at a kitchen table, and I want to say, I'm sorry I'm late, and I want her to say it's okay. Daddy and I want that to be true someday, instead of just kind. Silence. And I want the $1,200, Ethan said, because of the roof. 116. And Vanessa Langford, $41 million boat, running behind her. 60 employees around her 11 cameras on her face put both hands over her mouth. She stood there like that for 4 full seconds. Then she took them down and said in a voice nobody on that dock had ever heard her use, You'll take the 50. Ma'am, you'll take the 50 because you earned the 50, and because if you don't take it, every man watching this video is going to think the lesson is that good people don't get paid. Her eyes were wet and furious, and she did not wipe them. Don't you do that to them. Don't you dare. Half this country has been told their whole lives that decency is its own reward, and every one of them knows that's a lie people say when they don't want to open the checkbook. Ethan didn't say anything. Take the money, Mr. Carter. Yes, ma'am. And take the helicopter. No, ma'am. Ethan. It was the first time she'd used his name. No, ma'am, he said gently. Not for that. Not for me. 118. And then Lars Carlson said, Take my car. Everybody turned. What? Ethan said. Take my car. Carlson was already digging in his pocket. It is the black one at the end. It is a rental. It has 300 horsepower, and I have driven it 11 miles in 6 weeks because I have not left this dock. He held out the key. It is not a helicopter. It is a car. Nobody will see it. Nobody will make a video. His voice cracked straight down the middle. You will be there at 3:40. Ethan looked at the key. Sir, Mr. Carter. Carlson's hand was shaking. I have a boy at home who is not well, and I have not been in the same room with him in 6 weeks, and I did that to myself, and I did it because I was afraid of a woman signing a check, and you spent all morning refusing to say the word coward out loud in front of these cameras when it was sitting right there in your mouth. He pushed the key forward. Take the car. Let me do one honest thing today. Please. 119. Ethan Carter took the key. Thank you, sir. Do not thank me. No, sir, I'm gonna. Thank you. Ethan closed his hand on it. And Mr. Carlson. Yes. Go home. Carlson's face broke. Go home tonight. Not Monday. Tonight. Ethan picked up the toolbox. There ain't a boat on this earth worth 6 weeks of a sick kid wondering where you went, and you already know that, sir, you've known it longer than I've been alive. So go home. 1:20. Nobody stopped him after that. He walked the length of that dock with his father's toolbox in one hand and a rental key in the other, past 60 people who did not say a word, and about halfway down, somebody started clapping. Just one person. Then it was all of them. And Ethan Carter did not turn around because he was 35 years old and he had 211 miles to go and a tarp on his roof. And if he'd turned around at that particular second on that particular dock, he would not have made it back. 1:22. The last thing anybody heard him say, and 11 cameras got it, was to Nora Reyes, who'd followed him all the way to the gate and was standing there with her tablet against her chest. Miss Reyes. Yeah. Day 9. What? You knew on day 9. He opened the car door. Next time it's day 9, don't wait for a fella in bad boots to come ask you. There might not be one. And Nora Reyes stood at a security gate at a luxury marina in Charleston, South Carolina, and watched a black rental car pull out into traffic at 1:23 in the afternoon, and behind her, a $41 million boat ran and ran and ran. He got to Rock Hill at 3:41. Miss Odetta's Buick was still in the school lot, and Lily Carter was sitting on the curb with her green backpack and her library book, and when the black car pulled in, she stood up and looked at it, and then looked past it, scanning the lot for a truck. Lily. She turned. And Ethan Carter got out of a 300-horsepower rental car and split boots with grease on his forehead, and his daughter ran across a parking lot and hit him at full speed. You came. I'm late. You came, Lily said into his shirt. And a man who had not cried in front of another human being since 2019 stood in a school parking lot in Rock Hill, South Carolina at 3:41 in the afternoon and put his hand on the back of his daughter's head and did not say anything at all for a while. Then she pulled back. Whose car is that? A fella's. Did the boat run? It ran. Was it hard? Ethan Carter thought about 50 engineers and 11 cameras and a thermometer from 1987 and a man in a kitchen at 1 in the morning. No baby, he said. It was the easiest thing all day. 211 miles behind him on a dock in Charleston, Vanessa Langford was still standing exactly where he'd left her. And Priya, who had known her for 18 years, said, "Ma'am, the Singapore call." Vanessa didn't answer. "Ma'am, they're holding. It's 3 in the morning there. What do I tell them?" Vanessa Langford said, "Tell them I'll call back Monday." "Ma'am, that's they flew." "Tell them Monday, Priya." She was still looking down the empty dock at the gate. "I have 400 pages to read." The video went up at 9:14 that night, and by Sunday morning it had 11 million views, and it was a lie. Not a made-up lie. Every second of it was real. Somebody in a Navy jacket had shot it on a phone from 20 feet away and cut it down to 2 minutes and 40 seconds and put a title on it, and the title said, "Mechanic Destroys Billionaire CEO in Front of 50 Engineers." Ethan Carter found out about it in a driveway in Rock Hill at 8 in the morning with a coffee in his hand, because his phone had 206 notifications, and he'd assumed it was broken. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. You're on the internet." Ethan turned around. Lily was standing in the door in her pajamas with his tablet in both hands and her eyes about the size of the moon. "I'm what?" "Aunt Ray sent it. There's a lady. She's being mean to you." Ethan came up the steps and looked over her shoulder. There he was. 9:04 in the morning on a dock in Charleston, standing in split boots, and there was Vanessa Langford's voice, sharp as a dropped tool, saying the thing that would be on 11 million screens by Sunday. "Don't waste my time. If you're so confident, fix it. Cut. Laughter. 43 engineers laughing at his boots. Cut. 12:43. The boat coming alive. 60 people screaming. His own face blank, not understanding what to do with a man hugging him. Cut to black. 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and Ethan Carter stood in his own doorway and understood that 11 million people were about to learn something that had never happened. Daddy, why aren't you happy? Baby, go get dressed. But you won. Lily, go get dressed. 9:15 Sunday morning. His phone rang. Number he didn't know. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Carter, my name's Deb Sorensen. I'm a producer with... No, ma'am. Sir, I haven't. No, ma'am. Thank you. He hung up. It rang again in 90 seconds. Different number. Ethan Carter. Speaking. This is Grady Pell. I'm with Pell Marine out of Wilmington. We've got 14 yards on the eastern seaboard, and I'd like to talk to you about... Sir, it's 9 in the morning on a Sunday. I'll call back. Please don't. By noon, it was 41 calls. Mom. By 4, it was a man standing in his actual yard with a camera, and Ethan came out on the porch and said, Sir, there's a 8-year-old in this house, and you're on my grass. And the man said, Mr. Carter, one question. And Ethan said, You already asked it, and went inside and locked the door and sat down on the floor of his own hallway with his back against it. Lily sat down next to him. Neither of them said anything for a while. Daddy. Yeah. Is this bad? And Ethan Carter, 35 years old, with $440 in an envelope in a drawer and a check for $50,000 that hadn't cleared yet, said, I don't know yet. Baby, ask me in a week. Monday, 7:40 in the morning. 211 miles away, Vanessa Langford walked into a conference room in Charleston with 400 pages under her arm and her lawyer already talking. Vanessa, before you say anything. Sit down, Marcus. I need you to understand what's on the table. The class society doesn't have to see the deletion. It's a retention artifact. We can characterize it as a retention artifact, and there's a real argument. It's not a retention artifact. There's an argument, Vanessa, that's all I'm saying, and if you walk in there Monday and hand them a 14-page gap with your login on it, you are handing them a fraud finding with a bow on it. Your login, not Carlson's, yours. I know whose login it is. Then you know what happens. Tell me anyway. Marcus Ivy, who had been her lawyer for 16 years, put both hands flat on the table. The insurer's void. That's $41 million. Singapore's got a material adverse clause the size of Texas, and they will use it. That's $200 million. Class pulls the certificate on the hull, which means she can't move, which means there's no launch and no charter and no resale. And you personally, Vanessa, you individually are looking at a fraud referral on a federally documented vessel. He said it quietly. You'd be the second yacht owner in this country to face that. The first one did 19 months. Silence. And the alternative is that a threshold drifted, and we caught it, and we fixed it, and nobody's lying about anything, because that is all true, Vanessa. Every word of that is true. We just don't volunteer the 14 pages. Vanessa Langford looked at 400 pages of paper. 7:46. Marcus. Yeah. How many people knew? About what? About any of it. On that dock Friday. How many people were standing there knowing a piece of it and not saying it out loud? Marcus didn't answer. 60, Vanessa said. 60 people. And you know what the number was that mattered? Not 60. One. One man who didn't work for me. She pulled the stack toward her. I have spent 18 years building a company where the only person who can tell the truth is somebody I don't pay. Vanessa. So the answer is no. You'll lose everything. Marcus. She stood up. I already did. I just found out Friday. 9:12. Monday. Ethan Carter's phone rang while he was under a Silverado in his own driveway because life doesn't stop for 11 million views. He slid out, looked at it. Charleston area code. Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Priya Raman I work with. I remember, ma'am. Sir, I'm calling because Ms. Langford is going to release the full footage tomorrow morning. All of it. 11 cameras, 3 hours uncut. Ethan sat up. Say that again. All of it, sir. Including the part where Lars says what he did. Including the part where she says what she did. Including the part where you told 60 people that the story was a lie. Priya's voice was very carefully controlled. She wanted you to know first. Because you're in it, sir, and once it's out, and there's a piece of it that's about your daughter, and you didn't agree to that. Ethan sat in his driveway with a wrench in his hand. Ma'am, does she know what that does to her? Yes, sir. Does she know it's a fraud case? Yes, sir. Her lawyer's been in the room since 7. And she's doing it anyway. Yes, sir. Why? And Priya Raman said, Sir, I've worked for that woman for 18 years, and I've never once asked her a question I didn't already know the answer to. Friday, I found out that was the whole problem. A pause. So I asked her this morning. I asked her why. What'd she say? She said because a man drove home for 8 hours to keep a promise to a third grader, and if I edit this video, I'm going to spend the rest of my life knowing he was the only adult on that dock. 9:15. Ethan Carter closed his eyes. Ma'am, tell her to cut the part about my daughter. Sir. The 9 times. Miss Reyes saying 9 times. Cut that. Mr. Carter, that's the part that... I know what part it is. His voice came out rougher than he meant. That's exactly why. Ma'am, that little girl is 8 years old and she is going to be 40 someday, and she's going to be able to type her own last name into a phone and watch a stranger tell 11 million people that her daddy left her standing at a door 9 times. And she was fine. She was fine every one of those times, and she never once made me feel bad about it. And I'm not going to let a video make her wonder if she should have. Silence on the line. Sir, Priya said, and her voice had gone. Ma'am. I'll tell her. Tuesday, 10 in the morning. Vanessa Langford released 3 hours and 4 minutes of raw footage from 11 cameras unedited with one 9-second cut in it, and a statement that was 4 sentences long. The first sentence said the Aurelia had never had a mechanical failure. The second said the vessel had been protecting itself from a falsified maintenance record. The third said the record had been falsified by her chief engineer under an owner-delegate authority she had created, and that she had built a company where that was the rational thing for him to do. The fourth sentence said, the full log has been provided to the class society and to our insurers. I am not asking anyone to understand this. I'm asking them to watch the tape. By Wednesday, it was 90 million views, and the internet did what the internet does, which is that it split straight down the middle, and the crack ran right through the middle of every man over 55 who watched it. Half of them said she was a saint. Half of them said it was a stunt. And a third group, small and quiet, and entirely made up of men with bad knees and good hands, watched the part at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, where a mechanic said every man you've ever met worked for you, and did not comment at all because there wasn't anything to say. They'd known that their whole lives. They'd just never heard anybody say it out loud on a dock. Thursday. The class society suspended the Aurelia's certificate. Friday. Singapore invoked. $200 million walked out the door in a 9-minute phone call, and Vanessa Langford took that call standing up in an empty conference room with the door open on purpose so that everyone in the office could hear her lose it. They heard her say, yes. They heard her say, I understand. They heard her say, no, that's fair. And then they heard her say the thing that 4 of them would remember for the rest of their working lives. Mr. Tan, before you go, may I ask you something? In 11 years, has anybody who works for you ever told you something you didn't want to hear? Nobody knows what he said. But the call ran another 40 minutes. Meanwhile, in Rock Hill, the check cleared on a Tuesday. Ethan Carter drove to the orthodontist's office on his lunch break and stood at the counter in a shirt with his name on it and said, "Ma'am, I need to schedule my daughter." "Sure. Insurance." "No, ma'am. Payment plan we can do." "No, ma'am," Ethan said. "All of it." The woman looked up. "All of it." "Yes, ma'am." She started typing. Then she stopped. "Sir, are you?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. "I am." She didn't ask anything else. She just typed. And when she handed him the receipt, she held on to it half a second longer than she needed to and said quietly, "My daddy was a lineman for 31 years. "Yes, ma'am." He never got one. "No, ma'am," Ethan said. "They mostly don't." The roof came off in October.
上班
He did it himself with a fella named Dale from church and a nephew who was mostly in the way, and it took 9 days of evenings and 1 full Saturday. And on the last day, Lily sat in the yard in a lawn chair and held a clipboard and yelled instructions she'd made up, and Ethan Carter stood on his own house in the last hour of daylight and looked out over Rock Hill, South Carolina, and did not think about a boat one single time. The job offers didn't stop. They got worse. Pell Marine came back with $240,000 a year and a truck. A firm in Fort Lauderdale offered $300,000 and equity. A man from Houston flew to Charlotte, rented a car, drove to Rock Hill, and knocked on Ethan's door on a Sunday afternoon with a folder in his hand, and Ethan invited him in for a glass of tea because his mother had raised him and listened to him for 40 minutes and then said no. "Mr. Carter, I don't think you understand what I'm offering you." "I do, sir." $400,000. "Yes, sir." "And a title, VP of Technical Services. You'd fly." "Yes, sir." "And you're saying no?" "Yes, sir." The man sat back. "Why?" And Ethan Carter said, "How many nights?" "I'm sorry." "How many nights a year would I be gone?" The man from Houston did the math out loud without meaning to. 120. "She's 8, Ethan said. So I've got 10 summers left, maybe 9. Ethan set his glass down. "Sir, when she's 18, she's going to walk out of that door, and she is never going to live in this house again, and there's not a number you can put on a folder that buys me a Tuesday back." The man stared at him. "You'd be somebody." "Sir, I am somebody." Ethan said it without any heat at all. That's the part everybody keeps getting backwards. Y'all all watched a video where 50 people found out I was somebody, and now everybody thinks the video made me somebody. It didn't. I was somebody on Thursday. Nobody was filming. The man from Houston flew home. He told that story at a conference in March, and 1,100 people went quiet. November. The class society hearing ran 4 days. Lars Carlson testified on the second day. He testified for 6 hours. He did not have a lawyer, which his lawyer had begged him about, and he answered every question with a yes or a no or a full sentence. And when they asked him why he had reverted the parameter, he said, "Because I was afraid of losing my job." And when they asked him why he had deleted the record, he said, "Because I was more afraid of that than I was of what could happen to the people on the boat. And that is the sentence I have to say out loud in this room." They pulled his ticket for 5 years. Vanessa Langford testified on the third day. They asked her whether she had authorized the deletion. "No." "Did you authorize the parameter change?" "My name is on it." "That's not the question, Ms. Langford." "It's the only answer I've got," she said. "You're asking me whether I personally pressed a button. I'm telling you, I built a system where nobody ever had to tell me which buttons were being pressed, and then I acted astonished on a dock in front of 11 cameras. If this panel wants to draw a line between those two things, that's the panel's business. I'm not going to help you draw it." The room did not make a sound. The finding came down in January. Langford Marine paid $9.4 million in penalties. Vanessa Langford personally accepted a 2-year prohibition from serving as a technical decision-maker on any documented vessel which the panel invented for the occasion, because there had never once been an owner who asked for it. She asked for it. There was no fraud referral. Marcus Ivy told her afterward that in 16 years, it was the only case he'd ever won by telling the truth, and that he did not intend to make a habit of it. And Vanessa said, "Marcus." And he said, I know. Shut up." February. Nora Reyes quit Carlson Marine Systems. Gotcha. She quit on a Tuesday with no job lined up and an apartment in Rotterdam she'd have to break the lease on, and she sat in her car in the parking lot afterward and shook for 10 minutes, and then she called a number in Rock Hill, South Carolina that she had saved in her phone under one word. The word was Day 9. Carter. "Mr. Carter, it's Nora Reyes." "Miss Reyes." She could hear him wiping his hands. "Everything all right?" "I quit." "Okay." "That's it." "Okay. Was it Day 9? Nora Reyes started laughing, and it came out wrong and turned into something else. "There was a hull in Genoa," she said. "Same node architecture, same exchanger, same drift. I flagged it in November, and my supervisor logged it as a nuisance, and I sat on it for 11 weeks. Mr. Carter, 11 weeks after everything, after I stood on that dock and I still sat on it. And then I went in Tuesday and I said it out loud, and they told me to be a team player. So you quit?" "So I quit." "Good. That's all you're gonna say. Good, Miss Reyes." A long pause. "I'm real proud of you. That's the second thing I'm gonna say. I just wanted to make sure the first thing was the right one." Nora Reyes sat in a parking lot in Rotterdam and cried for a while. "What do I do now?" "Ma'am, I fix trucks in a driveway. You want career advice from me?" "Yes," Nora Reyes said. "Actually, yes, that's exactly what I want." March. Vanessa Langford called on a Thursday night at 8:45. Ethan almost didn't pick up. He was doing dishes, and Lily was at the table with a worksheet, and the number was Charleston. Carter. "Mr. Carter, it's Vanessa Langford." He turned the water off. "Ma'am? Is this a bad time?" "It's 8:45, ma'am. It's dishes." "Right." A breath. "I'll be quick. I'm starting something and I need your name on it, and I want you to say no." That's a strange sales pitch. "It's not a pitch. I'm telling you what I want. I want your name, and I want you to say no, and I've been sitting in a chair for 2 hours trying to figure out which one of those I want more." Ethan leaned against the counter. "Ma'am, what is it?" "An apprenticeship. Paid. 4 years. Marine Systems diesel hybrid high voltage. No degree requirement, no certification requirement, no resume. 200 seats a year to start." Her voice was moving fast now. "But that's not the part. Anybody can do that part. There's 40 programs like that, and they're all a press release." "What's the part?" "Every apprentice gets a phone number," Vanessa said. Ethan waited. "It rings on my desk," she said. "Not a hotline, not an ethics inbox, not an anonymous portal that goes to a vendor in Ohio. My desk. And the rule, which is in writing, which is in the contract, is that if an apprentice calls that number to say a thing is wrong, and they turn out to be wrong about it, nothing happens to them. Nothing. Not a note in a file, not a conversation, not a look in a hallway. And if they're right, we stop the boat." Silence. "Mr. Carter." "I'm here. Say something." "Ma'am." Ethan looked at his daughter at the kitchen table. "What happens the first time somebody stops a boat and costs you $6 million, and they were wrong?" "Then I've spent $6 million finding out the number works." Ethan Carter put a hand over his eyes. "Mr. Carter, I need your name on it. People will apply because of your name. They watched that video, they think you're—" "That's why it's a no, ma'am." "Yeah," Vanessa said. "Yeah, I know." Ma'am, listen. If my name's on it, then it's a story about a mechanic who beat 50 engineers, and every kid who signs up thinks the job is to be a genius. He shook his head at his own kitchen. That's not the job. The job's the phone number. You don't need a hero on the brochure, ma'am. You need 200 kids who find out on day 9 that somebody picks up. Long, long pause. Then help me name it, Vanessa said. Ma'am, that's not your name on it. That's just a favor. Help me name it. Ethan Carter stood in his kitchen in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and thought for a while. Call it Day 9, he said. They launched it in June with 411 applicants for 200 seats. Nora Reyes runs it. She had one condition, which she put in writing, which Vanessa signed without reading twice, that Reyes reports to nobody. Not to a VP, not to HR, not to Vanessa. The technical director of the Day 9 program answers to the class society and to a 5-person board, 3 of whom are working technicians with no degree between them, and one of whom is a 71-year-old boatyard owner from Georgetown named Duke Mabry, who took the call, listened for 4 minutes, and said, "Ma'am, I got emphysema and a bad hip. Will you do it?" "Hell yes, I'll do it," Duke Mabry said. Lars Carlson teaches Tuesdays and Thursdays. He can't sign anything for 5 years. He can't approve a work order, can't stamp a survey, can't put his name on a single piece of paper that touches a hall. So he stands in a shop in North Charleston twice a week in front of 19 and 20-year-olds with bad haircuts and no degrees, and the first class of every cohort is the same class, and it's 90 minutes long and there's no slides. He just tells them what he did. All of it. The kitchen, the one in the morning, the daughter at Lund, and the boy who wasn't well. The 6 minutes between the revert and the deletion. He tells them about the 43 days he stood on a dock with the answer in his chest and let 50 people look for it. And then he says the same last line every time. And 19-year-olds who have never been afraid of anything in their lives sit very still while a 62-year-old man says it. "I am the smartest person you will ever be taught by, and I have 2 patents in a boat you will never be able to afford, and none of that saved me. What would have saved me was a phone call. I was too proud and too frightened to make at 1 in the morning. You have that number in your pocket. I did not. That is the only difference between you and me, and it is the whole difference." His boy got better, by the way. Not all the way, but better. And Lars Carlson has been home for dinner 4 nights a week for 2 years, which he will tell you if you ask him is the most expensive thing he ever bought. Vanessa Langford sold the Aurelia. Not to a buyer, to a school. She gave it to a maritime academy in Norfolk for $1 hull batteries, 9 patents and all. And it sits there now with its deck plates up and its guts open and 100 kids a year crawling through it. And every single one of them gets told the story of the sensor on the starboard exchanger that was telling the truth the whole time and got punished for it. There's a plaque in the engine room. It doesn't have Ethan Carter's name on it. It says, "This vessel was never broken." Langford Marine is about 1/3 the size it used to be. Vanessa fired nobody to get there. She just stopped taking the kind of work that requires a man to sit in a kitchen at 1 in the morning, and it turns out that's most of the work. And she says, now that the company she has is the first one she's ever actually owned. Ethan Carter still fixes trucks in a driveway. He makes more than he used to. He does about 9 consults a year, mostly for yards, that call him with something dead and strange, and he charges an honest rate, and he drives home the same night every time, and he has not missed a 3:15 in 2 years. The tarp's in the garage. He kept it. Lily asked him once why, and he said, "So I remember what it looked like." And she said, "That's weird, Daddy." And he said, "Yeah." And that was the end of it. The braces came off in April. Which brings us to Career Day. Ridgeway Elementary, 3rd grade, 10 in the morning on a Friday in May. Mrs. Halloran had a doctor and a firefighter and a woman who did something with software that not one child in that room understood. And then she had a man in the back in a work shirt with his name stitched on it, who had not said a word for 40 minutes. By then, everybody in that school knew. The principal knew. The teachers knew. Half the parents knew, and 2 of them had asked him for a picture in the parking lot, which he had done because his mother raised him. Mrs. Halloran said, "And last we have Lily's dad, Mr. Carter." Ethan Carter stood up. He hadn't brought anything. That was the thing that got the teachers later in the lounge. Every other adult brought something. The doctor brought a stethoscope and let them listen to each other's hearts. The firefighter brought a helmet. The software woman brought stickers. Ethan Carter walked to the front of a 3rd-grade classroom in the same boots. He'd had them resoled twice. There was grease in the seams that was older than every child in the room. "Morning." "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Y'all are loud." They laughed, and a boy in the 2nd row who had absolutely been coached by somebody at his kitchen table shot his hand up. "Are you the guy from the video?" The room went quiet, the way rooms do when a kid asks the thing every adult wanted to. Ethan looked at Lily. Lily looked back at him from the 3rd row with her hands folded on her desk, 8 going on 9, and she did the thing she'd been doing to him her whole life, which was, wait. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I'm the guy from the video. My dad says you beat 50 engineers. Your dad's wrong." The boy's face fell about a foot. "Now hold on. Don't look like that." Ethan sat down on the edge of Mrs. Halloran's desk. "Your dad's not wrong 'cause he's dumb. He's wrong 'cause that's what the video says, and the video's short, and the truth was 3 hours long. That's all." "So what happened? You want the real one?" "Yes. All right." Ethan put his hands on his knees. "There was a boat. Big one. Cost more than this whole school and every house on this street put together. And it wouldn't run. And 50 of the smartest people in the whole world came and looked at it for 43 days and they could not figure out why." "And you figured it out?" "Nope." 22 3rd-graders said, "Nope," at once. There was a lady there, Miss Reyes. She figured it out on day 9. Ethan held up 9 fingers. 9. 43 days it sat there, and she knew on day 9, and she didn't say anything for 34 days. Why not? 'Cause she was scared. Of what? Of her boss. The room thought about that, and there was a fella there, Ethan said, named Mr. Carlson, smartest man on that whole dock. He knew before anybody. He knew what was wrong with that boat 6 weeks before I ever showed up, and he sat in his kitchen in the middle of the night all by himself, and he knew, and he didn't say anything either. Was he scared? Yep. Of the same boss? Yep. A girl in the front row said, "That's dumb." And Ethan Carter said, "Sweetheart, that's the smartest thing anybody said about this whole story in 2 years." The room laughed. Mrs. Halloran put a hand over her mouth. "So what did you do?" the boy said. I said it out loud. That's it. That's it. That's not anything. No, sir, Ethan said. It ain't. He let that sit. Here's the thing I want y'all to actually hear, and then I'll shut up, and Mrs. Halloran can give you your snack. That boat was never broken. Not one day. Not 1 second. Everybody was running around hollering about what was wrong with it, and there was nothing wrong with it. It was just sitting there being honest, and waiting for one person to be honest back. 22 8-year-olds looked at him. Ickies. And it waited 43 days, Ethan said. It waited 43 days for one person, and the reason it had to wait that long isn't 'cause the smart people weren't smart enough. They were plenty smart. It's 'cause every single one of them needed permission, and there wasn't anybody there to give it to them. The girl in the front row said, "Who gave you permission?" Ethan Carter smiled. "Nobody, baby," he said. "That's the whole trick. Nobody ever does." Bam. The boy in the second row said, "So what's your job? Like, what do you do?" And Ethan Carter stood up off that desk and looked at 22 third graders in a classroom in Rock Hill, South Carolina, with grease in the seams of his boots, and a daughter in the third row watching him with her chin up, and he said it. "I don't fix engines." He picked up his father's toolbox. "I help folks find out that real skill don't need permission to exist. Somebody's going to tell you it does. They're going to tell you it comes with a degree or a title or a jacket with your name on it. And I'm telling you right now today in this room, so you remember it when you're 40 and somebody's got you scared. It doesn't. You already got it. Nobody's going to hand it to you and nobody can take it. And the only thing you ever have to do is open your mouth and say the true thing out loud on day 9 instead of day 43. Nobody moved. Mrs. Halloran's third grade class sat in complete silence for 4 full seconds. And then, Lily Carter, 8 years old in the third row, sat up as straight as she has ever sat in her life, and she did not clap and she did not cheer. She just smiled. That's it. That's the whole story. 50 of the best engineers on Earth stood on a dock for 43 days, and a man in bad boots walked up with a thermometer his daddy carried out of a shipyard in 1987, and he didn't beat a single one of them. He just said the thing they all already knew. And that's the part everybody gets wrong, and it's the part that matters, so hear it. Once plain, the genius was never in the toolbox.